Shalom, shalom. All right, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And through the Spirit, I wanted to go into, at least for today, the book of First Maccabees, the first chapter. And depending on how the Spirit goes, if the Spirit allows, I might continue on, in some more subsequent chapters. But I've been meaning to go into First Maccabees and possibly Second Maccabees for a while, as it contains a lot of history and information that is critical to know and understand. All right, they call this time the intertestamental period, basically in between Old Testament and New Testament. All right, which is where you get the history, a large portion of the history of the Greeks. All right, in the Old Testament, we end off. You hear about the Assyrians, you hear about the Babylonians, you hear about the Persians, the Medo-Persians, and in the New Testament, we deal with the Romans. But it's really in that intertestamental period that you really get a lot of history as to the Greeks, and it is through this history that you'll get a better understanding of the Gentiles, that are spoken about in the New Testament in certain scriptures. All right, and get the understanding of the history as to how things are taking place in the time of Yahushua and the disciples being on the scene. Right, it's almost like watching a movie and you're thrown right into the middle of things that are going on, and then at some point they do a flashback to show you how did you get to this point. So understanding that history in the book of Maccabees is very important, number one. And number two is that this also is a faith builder, because there are some, the chapters in here go into the hardships that we faced back during the time of the Greeks reigning over us. And when you read it, a lot of the things and policies and hell that they brought upon us for being Israelites, will be repeated in this time. So it's good to read about how our forefathers, stood firm for the Lord and what the Lord did in return for them because of that. So with that being said, this is First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "And it happened that after Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece." Now, this Alexander is Alexander the Greek. Some call him Alexander the Great. And he was the son of Philip, right? Philip of Macedon. And as you can see, it calls him a Macedonian. And I believe, and this is also a precept that can be used to link the Amalekites, all right, as well, because I believe Haman, the descendant of Agag, he was a Macedonian as well, all right, but he was also an Amalekite, okay. And so when you link that up now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think that part is in the additions of the Book of Esther, because clear evidence that certain information was attempted to be hidden was when you read the Book of Esther. There are certain chapters that in the regular Bible are not there, but if you can find those in the Apocrypha, and they go into certain information. But as it says, who came out of the land of Kittim, which is Cyprus, had smitten Darius. Now, Darius here, first off, Darius is more of a title, all right, less of a name per se, but it's more of a title, just like you have Pharaoh and you know, Shahs and so on and so forth. So in this Darius, you need context, right? So you can, I believe this was Darius the third, the last or so of the Syrians. So let's see, Alexander Great versus Darius the third. Oh, all right. And it was known as the Battle of Gaugamela. Just reading a little bit of context about it, it says here the Battle of Gaugamela, also called the Battle of Arbela, took place in 331 BC between the forces of the army of Macedon under Alexander the Great and the Persian army under King Darius the Third. Now, when you go back into the history, we know that the Persians took down Babylon, right? Cyrus was the king at the time, and they basically pulled up, and you read in not Darius, Daniel the fifth chapter, get into the end of it, you have the writing on the wall. Daniel breaks it down. Salaki explaining to Belshazzar that that night he was pretty much gonna die, and then they took it over, and then that region of Babylon was given into the control of Darius the Mede, which when you read in the secular history, Darius the Mede was the grandfather of Cyrus the Great through his mother's side. But going on, it says so the Persians took over from the Babylonians after they had already taken over the Medes. They took over from the Babylonians and they reigned for a while. So the during the time when we were rebuilding the temple, during the time of Nehemiah when we were rebuilding the walls, the time of Ezra, the time of Esther, Mordecai, that was all during the Persian reign, and they reigned for a while, all the way up until the Lord raised up Alexander, and the Greeks to come up and take them down. So that's what we're reading of here. And this is also spoken of in the book of Daniel, the eighth chapter. All right, it's described as a ram with two horns, which is the Medo-Persian Empire or the Achaemenid Empire, and the he-goat with a horn between his eyes, which represents the Greeks. So it says, where are we? Okay, so it says took place in 331 BC between the forces of the army of Macedon under Alexander the Great and the Persian army under King Darius III. It was the second and final battle between the two kings and is considered to be the final blow to the Achaemenid Empire, resulting in its complete conquest by Alexander. All right, so in a nutshell, there you go. That's what's being spoken about here in the first verse. All right. So it says here, after he had smitten Darius the king, which is Darius the third of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. Okay. Now his father was Philip. However, it was really under Alexander that you had that united, because Greece used to be like city states. All right, they weren't really united as one. They were more city states. So under Alexander, you had that they were all united under pretty much, like, for the most part, one force. And then he continued to expand his empire. So it says, and many great wars, and made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth. Yeah, because he came all the way from Macedon, right? If you look here, if you type in the Grecian Empire, this is a quote unquote educative lesson. So, it might not be the forte for some, but you gotta learn one way or another. So this is all the way from Macedon. This is the Greek Empire, right? All the way from Macedon, Cyrene, coming more eastward, right, into Asia Minor or Anatolia, and then also taking down Coal, Syria, coming, taking Egypt, moving more eastward, taking over Assyria and all of that. And then you have that clash because the Achaemenid Empire, they had this region on lockdown. So as Alexander was expanding, he had to clash with them and take over them and came as far as India. Okay. So that's why it says he won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, in so much that the earth was quiet before him Why? Because the Most High raised them up to rule in this time, according to the vision that was given to Nebuchadnezzar, as well as the vision that was given to Daniel. In Daniel, the second chapter is where the Nebuchadnezzar's vision was, and in Daniel, the seventh chapter is where Daniel had that vision of the various empires that would rule. So it says here, the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up, meaning he became proud, right? He had conquered pretty much a good portion of the known world. And he gathered a mighty, strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. Now, there were two main partitions. Okay, one was known as the partition of Babylon. Partition of Babylon. Yep. And as you can see, partition of Babylon, it says the partition of Babylon was the first of the conferences and ensuing agreements that divided the territories of Alexander the Great. It was held at Babylon in June 323 BC. Alexander's death at the age of 32 had left an empire that stretched from Greece all the way to India. The issue of succession resulted from the claims of various supporters of Philip Aridaeus, Alexander's half-brother, and the as of then unborn child of Alexander and Roxana, among others. The settlement saw Aridaeus and Alexander's child designated as joint kings, with Perdiccas serving as regent. And you can guess, if you're interested, you can do some research on Perdiccas. The territories as of the empire became satrapies, divided between the senior officials of the Macedonian army and some local governors and rulers. So they broke up the empire into different like states, different portions. It says the partition was solidified at the further agreements at Triparadisus. Yeah, so you had the partition of Babylon, then you had the partition of Triparadisus. It says in Persepolis over the following years and began the series of conflicts that comprised the wars of the Diadochi. The Diadochi is a term for the successors of Alexander. And when you read into that, the wars of the Diadochi, however you want to say it, basically it was that's where they ended, right? One of the final ones was the Battle of Ipsus between Ptolemy the first, Soter, Seleucus, Antigonus, Cassander, Lysimachus, and they basically joined together and took out Antigonus because he was expanding his territory too much. So there's the partition of Babylon. Now I believe a part of those, because it mentioned right, those that have been brought up with him from his youth. I believe that might have been Cassander and Ptolemy, and they I think they went to the same school or whatever, but pretty much they knew him when they were all younger. So it says, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. Yeah, because after they died, you had the various wars because they were all trying to accumulate territory. And so the final, the last remaining generals that had the most territories were Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus. Okay, that's why we mainly mention them as the four generals, but Alexander had more than four generals, and each of them named themselves kings over their territories. So when you read in Daniel the 11th chapter, for example, you'll hear about the king of the north and the king of the south. The king of the north, that north was referring to that area of uh, the Seleucid Empire, and the south was referring to the Ptolemaic Empire or Ptolemaic dynasty. These were all at one point all part of the Greek Empire, but they were broken up. So it says, and evils were multiplied in the earth, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes. Now, Antiochus came from the line of Seleucus. All right, from the Seleucid dynasty, you had Seleucus the first, Nicator, and then all the way down. I believe you had Antiochus the first, Soter, then Antiochus the second, Theos, and then Seleucus the second, either Callinicus or Serranus, and then you had Seleucus the third, and then you had Seleucus the third. I believe he had a brother, Antiochus the third, the Great, whose son was Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes. So Antiochus comes from that line, that Seleucid line. That's why it says, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, which I believe he gave himself that surname. It says, son of Antiochus the king, and this is Antiochus the third. They call him Antiochus the third, the Great, who had been in hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. And I mean, based on how the spirit goes, I might not um, go be able to get through the whole chapter in one video. So I might come back and do a part two to finish the chapter. But let's see how far I get. So because I just want to stop at certain points and just give you those little areas you can research more on in terms of the secular history on these verses. So now, verse 10, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king. Now, Antiochus the king here is referring to Antiochus the third, Antiochus the third, the great. Um, and as you can see here, his let me see, does it show his children? Yeah, his children. You had Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes, you had Seleucus the fourth Philopator, and I believe you had a few more. Okay, but this man Antiochus the third got into it with the Romans, and he ended up getting defeated. So he had to sign a treaty called the Treaty of Apamea. Um, Treaty of Apamea. And this is a treaty that was signed in 188 BC. As you can see, the Treaty of Apamea was a peace treaty conducted in 188 BC between the Roman Republic and Antiochus III, ruler of the Seleucid Empire. It ended the Roman Seleucid War. The treaty took place after Roman victories at the Battle of Thermopylae in 191 BC, the Battle of Magnesia in 190 BC, and after Roman and Rhodian naval victories over the Seleucid navy. Now, a part of the terms and treaties, of course, he had to basically scale down his warships and all of that. He had to pay a certain amount in tribute to the Romans, but also a key part is he had to provide hostages to Rome. And I'm trying to find that part in there, but let's see. There we go. So it says here, okay. Antiochus had to give 20 hostages whom the Roman consul would select. The hostages would be changed every third year, except the son of Antiochus. In the future, he would maintain no elephant. So 20 hostages, one of those hostages was the son of Antiochus the third, the Great, which was Antiochus Epiphanes. So that's why when you read here, it tells you that he was the son of Antiochus the king, who had been in hostage at Rome, right? That was Antiochus Epiphanes. Because of the Treaty of Apamea, he was one of the hostages that was sent to Rome. And when he went over there as a hostage, he stayed there for a while. He made some friends, one of them being Gaius Lanus Popilius, if I remember his name correctly. But he's the one who came basically drew if you're familiar with the breakdown in Daniel 11, there's a portion in there that speaks about it, how Antiochus tries to invade Egypt, but he is stopped by the Romans, and the Roman official that comes to meet him is this guy's Lanus Popilius, who draws a circle around Antiochus and tells him to give an answer as to whether he's going to withdraw or not before stepping out the circle, and if he didn't, he would be declaring war against Rome. Now, when you read the history of that, Antiochus originally was going to go shake Gaius's hand because he knew him from when he was a hostage at Rome. But then he said he wasn't. Gaius refused to shake his hand until business was done first, which was a part of the reason Antiochus returned back in rage and then decided to take out that anger on Israel. But going on, it says here, and he reigned. So after Antiochus after he came out, after he got out from being a hostage, he came back to Antioch, or came back to Syria. And it says, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. Now, when Antiochus came back, here's the thing. Antiochus Epiphanes was a hostage at Rome. His brother, Seleucus IV Philopator, was the actual king of the Seleucid dynasty at the time. When Antiochus came back, Seleucus's son, Antiochus, I believe it was Antiochus the fifth, or just Antiochus, was supposed to be the new heir. So Antiochus came up in there, and through deceit and treachery, acting as though he was going to be a tutor, to his nephew and all of that, ended up, you know, taking the young boy out, and then basically usurping the throne. So that's how he became so-called king. All right, at that time, he pretty much usurped the throne, and he had help from Eumenes the second to get the forces that he would use to come over there, and then he also took over the Syrian forces over there. Because remember, these were Edomites that had taken over lands of other nations. The Ptolemies were Edomites that were ruling over native Egyptians, and then the Seleucids were Edomites that were ruling over Syrians, and a conglomerate of certain heathens that were living around the area where they had conquered. So a part of Antiochus's army contained, yeah, you had Edomites, but you also had other nations in there, and you also had Israelites in there. But as it says, verse 11, in those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. And those same spirits are back here again. Okay, is I know the white man is the devil, but take it anyway. So it says, so this device pleased them well. So you had wicked Israelites that agreed. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Let's go and join ourselves and do what they do, so we can get those privileges. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king. So they were so down with it, they went all the way to the king to seek permission. It says, who gave them license to do after the ordinance of the heathen. So they had permission from the king to come and do what they wanted to do. So now who could stand in their way, right? Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. So they built a gym, which the word gym goes back to the word gymnos, which means naked. So pretty much they will be training naked because that's what the Greeks used to do. And they built it in Jerusalem, right, according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, which is a term called epispasm. The apostles have brought that out many times. Epispasm, and when you look that up, it's pretty much the reverse of circumcision, right? A form of foreskin restoration to reverse circumcision, historically practiced among some Jews in Hellenistic and Roman societies. Okay, so that's pretty much when they made themselves uncircumcised, both physically but also spiritually, by forsaking the laws and the ways of the Lord. But they did it physically, and the term for that is epispasm. Now you can do more research and find out about that if you're interested, but that's the term. It says, and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief, like Jake do today. It says, now when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion of two realms. So after he came back as a hostage and took over, right, the Seleucid empire, because he wasn't the rightful heir, right, but he came in there and took over. He decided, oh, now he wanted to go and take over Egypt as well. He wanted to go conquer that place. That's why it says that he might have the dominion of two realms. Wherefore he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, with chariots and elephants and horsemen and a great navy, and made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt. But Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death. Now, I believe when you read in the six Syrian wars, this was during the sixth Syrian war. And this Ptolemy at the time was Ptolemy the sixth. Let's see, Philometor, I believe. uh, Coming down. So this is the sixth Syrian war, and let's see, trying to see if I can find. All right. So it says here the causes of the new conflict are obscure. Relations declined between the two powers, who were both sending emissaries to Rome, asking for military support against the other before the war even started. Now I want to see. I just want to get to the point. All right, here we go. So it says here, just as the Ptolemaic army moved out of Pelusium to begin its invasion of Coal Syria, which Coal Syria goes back to Kal Syria, which means all Syria, right? The Hebrew word Kal means all. Like you say, Kal Halal, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, you're saying all praises to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. So it says the Seleucids defeated Ptolemaic army in the Sinai desert, perhaps due to Egyptian surprise at the Seleucids being ready to fight immediately. Ptolemaic losses mounted as they retreated to Pelusium, but Pelusium quickly fell with little loss of life and a surrender of the Ptolemaic army. Pelusium was the gateway to the rest of Egypt. With it under control, Seleucid supply lines were secure and Egypt was in grave danger. Antiochus took Naucrates and camped near Alexandria, potentially threatening a siege. So going back to the chapter, as it says, um, he entered into Egypt with a great multitude, and then he made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt. But Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, right? We read that they retreated, and many were wounded to death. Thus they got the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof, right? So we just read about one of the strong cities was Pelusium, right? And also, as it says here, Naucrates, or Naucratis, however you say it. So I mean, as we're going through, you're seeing that the scriptures line up with secular history. All right. If you want to deny that, then that's up to you. But I mean, this is pure history. So it says, and after that, Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude. Now, when you keep reading on down, this Ptolemy the sixth was the nephew of Antiochus Epiphanes, because this Ptolemy was the offspring or the son of Ptolemy the fifth and Cleopatra the first. Cleopatra was Antiochus Epiphanes' sister. All right, they had the same father, who was Antiochus the third the Great. He sent Cleopatra over there basically as a means to get access in there and control over Ptolemy, because Ptolemy was young. However, Cleopatra ended up doing her own thing, and so their child being Ptolemy the sixth, this one right here we're reading about that Antiochus just went to war with, pretty much Antiochus went to war with his nephew. So after he had taken over those cities, he pretty much tried to set up his nephew as a puppet ruler, so he could have control over Egypt without actually physically completely invading them. So it says here, and after that, Antiochus had smitten Egypt. He returned again in the 143rd year and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered proudly into the sanctuary and took away the golden altar and the candlestick of light and and all the vessels thereof, and the table of the shewbread and the pouring vessels and the vials, and the censers of gold and the veil and the crown and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off. He took also the silver and the gold and the precious vessels. Also he took the hidden treasures which he found. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly. Now, if you notice, it didn't mention that he took the Ark of the Covenant, because if he pulled down the veils and everything, he could there was the Holy of Holies, but he didn't take the Ark of the Covenant because the Ark of the Covenant wasn't there. The Ark of the Covenant had already been hidden a long time ago by Jeremiah, and that's in I believe Second Maccabees, either the fourth chapter, if I'm not mistaken. So it says here, verse 24, and when he had taken away all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly. And the reason he was able to do this was because the Lord was angry at Israel. And so he was, matter of fact, when you read in certain scriptures in the book of Daniel that speak about this time, right? It talks about, oh, matter of fact, let me get a quick precept here, right? It refers to it as the indignation. Um, I believe Daniel, what is it? What is it? Is it 12? Let's see. On the side. Do, 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 do. Is it long? Let's see, indignation. And maybe we can filter this. In the book of Daniel, what do we have? What do we have? So indignation, 11, Daniel 8. All right, here we go. I think this is one. The king shall do according to the will. Yep. Daniel 11 and 36. Yep. And I believe this king here is referring to Antiochus. It says, and the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself. Yep. Definitely talking about Antiochus, Epiphanes, and magnify himself above every god. That's why he gave himself the epithet of Epiphanes, right? God manifest. And shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods. As we read, he spoke proudly, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that is determined shall be done. So the reason he was able to go ahead and do all of this was because there was a period of indignation where the Lord was angry, and he brought judgment upon Israel for their wicked deeds by raising up Antiochus and allowing him to do the things he did to the nation of, or to the Israelites here. So it says, verse 25, therefore there was a great mourning in Israel in every place where they were. So now, mind you, at this point, you had certain Israelites that had willfully went to join the ways of the heathen. So, and it said many, right? So they go and they start doing the ways of the heathen. They're gonna, for the period of time, the years in between, Jake has children, Jake moves, they migrate. So at this point, those Israelites are gonna teach, they are teaching these customs to their children. So you already have a set of Israelites that were going to be born and raised in the customs of the Greeks, because their fathers were a part of the wicked men that it pleased to go and do after the ways of the heathen. But you also had other Israelites that consented to this, but not by way of being willingly, but out of fear for their lives. And I'm likely going to end it at maybe verse 30 or so, and then come back and continue. But as it says here, therefore there was a great mourning in Israel in every place where they were, so that the princes and elders mourned, the virgins and young men were made feeble, and the beauty of women was changed. Yeah, because everybody was in a state of mourning. Every bridegroom took up lamentation, and she that sat in the marriage chamber was in heaviness. The land also was moved for the inhabitants thereof, and all the house of Jacob was covered with confusion. All right, which um I have to look into this word, but I get a feeling that this confusion is more so dealing with shame. Like in Daniel, what, the ninth chapter, right? Unto us belongs confusion of face, but that's really going into shame. It says, and after 2 years fully expired, the king Antiochus sent his chief collector of tribute onto the cities of Judah, who came unto Jerusalem with a great multitude, and spake peaceable words unto them, but all was deceit. For when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city and smote it very sore and destroyed much people of Israel. You see that? The scriptures tell you in Psalms, I believe 55 and 21, around there, it talks about how his words were smoother than butter, yet was war was in his heart. Right? His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. So yeah, pretty much that was the nature of this devil. Okay, that's why you can't trust him. Um, so it goes on to read. Where we? Yep. It says, but all was deceitful when they had given him credence, when they said, okay, you know what, let's let him in. And that's why the scriptures say, never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. So it says he fell suddenly upon the city and smote it very sore and destroyed much people of Israel. And when he had taken the spoil, and it's the same tactics that they're using now. All right. They're gonna people when people give them credence, right? You trust, oh, well, they're trying to do this for you. They're gonna mess you up. All right. They're gonna mess you up very badly because the indignation of the Lord is gonna be upon the world, mainly Israel. That's why it's called Jacob's trouble. I watched a video that was re-uploaded of a brother having a vision or a dream about Jacob's trouble. And it was a beautiful video, but as he was going into it, there was a lot of death, and killing going on. And not everybody, I'm sure not everybody was as blessed as he was in the dream. This is why this truth is so important. And people don't understand that, but it's okay. Because when it happens, they're gonna wish. They're gonna wish so hard, but it's not gonna be enough. So it says here, verse 31, and when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire and pulled down the houses and the walls thereof on every side. But the women and the children took they captive and possessed the cattle. So that means people's wives and their children were taken captives. Now, either some of these men were alive, some of them were dead, but imagine you were one of those people having your family taken away captive. Maybe you had to flee or whatever the case is. Or you try to flee and they caught you and killed you, and then they took your family captive. See, in those times, which they're gonna do that in this time again, but when they do these things, you're gonna realize how powerless you truly are. A lot of people move around with so much pride as if they can do anything they want to do, like everything is in their will. But when Jacob's trouble comes, you're gonna realize just how truly powerless you are and how much you really need to depend on a higher power. That's when all that proud talk is gonna come back and bite you right in the ass. You wanted to do everything yourself. You wanted to be G.I. Jane. You wanted to be Mr. I'm the shit. So be the shit. Show us what you got. We're not Mr. I'm the shit. We Mr. Depend on Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. I mean, that's what we've been saying from day one. So it goes on to read, it says, they then builded they the city of David and a great and strong wall and with mighty towers and made it a stronghold for them. So they pretty much built a fortress inside of Jerusalem. All right. And they put therein a sinful nation, wicked men, and fortified themselves therein. So, like a garrison, they set up in there. They stored it also with armor and victuals, which is food. And when they had gathered together the spoils of Jerusalem, they laid them up there, so they became a sore snare. So, pretty much, they took over Jerusalem. They built a fortress in there, like a stronghold in there, and they basically they hijacked and took over the city. It says, for it was a place to lie in wait against the sanctuary and an evil adversary to Israel, because the temple was also in Jerusalem. So anybody that would try to come to the temple or anything like that, you would have these wicked men that were in the stronghold that would, you know, basically either examine you or put you to death if they caught wind that you were trying to go to the temple or do anything holy. Thus they shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary and defiled it, in so much that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them. So a lot of people fled the city. and they ran what the land of Ammon, ran fled into different lands. It says, whereupon the city was made a habitation of strangers and became strange. So you had heathens that were all up in this place, and I'm sure you had some wicked Israelites as well, and became strange to those that were born in her, and her own children left her. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach, her honor into contempt. As had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellency was turned into mourning. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom. So, in addition to all of this, because this guy's a straight demon, that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. So these many Israelites that did this, what do you think they taught their children and their children's children? Right? They continued in these ways. So you had a large portion of Israelites. Remember, some of them fled. Some of them, a majority of them living in nearby areas. Remember that Antiochus had control over a big portion, not just Israel or Syria. He controlled Mesopotamia and that region as well, and Antioch and places in Asia Minor. He had control over that. So remember that he wrote this to his whole kingdom. So not just people in Israel, but people in Asia Minor, people in towards the east, people in Syria. So all those Israelites that were living there, right? Many Israelites consented onto his religion. Some of these were Israelites that weren't living in Jerusalem, but they were still within the domain of Antiochus's kingdom, and they consented onto his religion, and they practiced these things, these heathenistic customs, and they taught it unto their children. So when you go into the future, there's a reason you have a lot of Israelites that were in the various lands. You had Israelites over in the east, in Mesopotamia, Israelites over in all over Asia Minor, Israelites all over Antioch that didn't know they were Israelites because going all the way back, there some of them forefathers were part of these Israelites that consented onto Antiochus's religion and forsook the holy covenant, stop teaching their children, stop circumcising them, and push them towards the ways of the Greeks. So that's how they were raised, but it doesn't mean that they weren't Israelites. They were just Israelites who had been taken off the path and misled and taught ways of the heathen and were raised that way. So going on, it says, verse 44, for the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice. Now we were supposed to do offerings morning and an evening oblation, but he forbid that. It says and sacrifice, where are we at? And drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, the Passover, the the Pentecost, all the different holy days that we read in the law that we're supposed to keep. Basically, he was saying to profane that and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts. That's going off to the max, because first off, even if you're sacrificing a lawful animal, there's a certain way you're supposed to do it. Your animal can't even be with blemish. It has to be without blemish. So there's a certain way you're supposed to sacrifice even a lawful animal. How much more for an unlawful animal upon the altar? Which, mind you, the whole sanctuary when it was built was consecrated. It was anointed, and the utensils, the altars, they were all anointed and made holy. So to profane it on such a level, I mean, damn. It says that they should also leave their children uncircumcised. So instead of circumcising your child on the 8th day, no more of that. and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. And this happened to some Israelites. They forgot the law. They changed the ordinances. They started living like heathens and teaching that unto their descendants. So guess what? Their descendants started living like heathens. All right. Yeah, this is a good precept. GMS Truth Be Told 144, Acts 16 and 1. Then came he to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there named Timotheus, the son of a certain woman which was a Jewess, and believed, but his father was a Greek. Now, it doesn't mean that his father was a heathen. His father was an Israelite that was practicing Greek customs. Okay. And that's why it's important to look into those words. See, so if somebody just reads it over and they don't look into the word there, they was, oh, see, Timothy was a Greek because his father was a Greek. But what does the word Greek mean? When you see the word Greek in the New Testament, does it have only one definition? Is there only one Greek word there for the word Greek? No, it's not. It's just like the word world. The word world, there's more than one Greek word that can be translated into the English word world. Cosmos, oikomeni, eon. These are three different Greek words that when translated to English, they all translate to the word world. So how do you know what kind of world it's talking about? You need to go back and look at what was the Greek word there and what does that word mean. And it's the same thing when you see the word Greek. You got to go back and see what is the actual root word and what does it mean. So yeah, good precept. Um, so continuing on, it says here, verse 50, and whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. And they're going to do that in this time, right? This time is going to be whosoever would not worship the IOTB, right? The image of the bee should be killed. And they're going to come out with laws and legislations, just like Antiochus did back then. And they're going to fashion it in a way where that's why it says there shall be an insurrection upon those that fear the Lord. It says, verse 51, in the self same manner he wrote he to his whole kingdom, and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. So they set up overseers to make sure that people were obeying this commandment. Then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, every one that forsook the law. And so they committed evils in the land, and drove the Israelites into secret places, even wheresoever they could flee for succor. So with all this going on, it was like a persecution on Jake, and then you had some that fled. Now the 15th day of the month Caslu, in the 140 and fifth year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and so they basically completely profaned and defiled the altar, and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they found, they burnt them with fire. So any scriptures, any scrolls, they burnt it. And whosoever was found with any of the book of the testament, or if any committed to the law, the king's commandment was that they should put him to death. And they're going to do the same thing in this time. Thus did they. But now, as we keep reading through the various chapters, you'll see, well, even being faced with this condition, what did some Israelites do? They stood up, they stood firm. And what did the Lord do on their behalf? He fought for them. So it says, thus did they, by their authority, unto the Israelites every month, to as many as were found in the cities. Now the 25th day of the month, the 25th, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of God. Complete disrespect. It says, at which time, according to the commandment, they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised. So you had certain women that were still trying to adhere to the laws of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, and they circumcised, they had their children circumcised, well, they put them to death. It says, and they hanged the infants about their neck. Why infants? Because the circumcision would happen on the 8th day. So the child would still be an infant. But it says here, they hanged them about their neck and rifled their houses and slew them that had circumcised them. So, or anybody that was caught performing the circumcision, they put them to death. Howbeit, many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing. Wherefore, the rather to die, that they might not be defiled with meats, and that they might not profane the holy covenant. So then they died. So you had some that died for standing up for the laws of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. And there was a very great wrath upon Israel. So, as you can see, the reason this was happening was because the Lord was angry. All right. And he brought judgment through his wrath upon the nation of Israel by setting up Antiochus and allowing these things to happen. All right. Um, Yep, this is a good one. This is GMS Truth Be Told 144. Second Maccabees 6 and 5. The altar also was filled with profane things, which the law forbiddeth. Yep, because that's what they were pushing. Verse 5, the Slakia. Verse 6. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient fasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. So pretty much, who was going to stand up for the Lord? Even if it meant their life was at risk. But anyway, that was pretty much it. I mean, I originally thought I was gonna end, but the spirit just had me going anyway. So Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. Like I said, if the spirit permits, Lord willing, I'll go through some more chapters. But yeah, I ma- I put some certain points in the secular history. So if you're interested, you can definitely read more about that. But it's still crucial to know and understand the history of the book of Maccabees, because it'll give you a better understanding or a proper understanding of the New Testament. Okay. So anyway, with that, Lord willing, you were edified. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.